Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody. It's now 8 o'clock, which is the official start time of our program. And in order to run as efficiently and as productively as possible, we're going to start on time. We're very honored, ladies and gentlemen, to have Rabbi Laibl Wolf joining us from Melbourne, Australia. For us, it's Thursday night. For Rabbi Wolf, I believe it's Friday morning already. And thank you very, very much for taking the time to do this with us for our community. Obviously, really appreciate this. And it's a fascinating thing, as we're supposed to all be isolating, but the wonderful thing is that we're all connecting in new and marvelous ways, which aren't always possible. This is the second in our speaker series. About 10 days ago, we had Rabbi Manis Friedman. Today, we have Rabbi Laibl Wolf from Australia. I do want to announce that next Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be having our next guest speaker, and that will be Gil Hoffman, very different type of a speaker. He's a journalist, the chief political analyst with the Jerusalem Post, and he'll be talking about a view from Israel, what's happening in Israel during these turbulent times. You know, Israel's always turbulent, and now it's a whole nother vibe altogether. We do have Rabbi Laibl Wolf with us. As you all know, Rabbi Wolf is a world-renowned mystic, an author and speaker, and an expert in Jewish meditation. Rabbi Laibl Wolf lives in Australia and lectures worldwide on Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and Jewish meditation. And we thank you, Rabbi Wolf, for taking the time to be with our community during this time to speak about tonight's topic, which is Unleashing the True Me, Meditations to Train Positive Attitudes During Times of Crisis. And I hand you over to Rabbi Wolf.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you, especially under these adverse circumstances that we find ourselves. And yet it's ironical that with the challenges that face us, there's a greater capacity to make self-discoveries and discoveries about others, especially in terms of our inner capacities. So I'd like to take the time to divide the session into a number of component parts. The first part, I want to discuss a little more about what does it mean, the inner I? Who am I really? Then I want to speak in context of what we do with our mind by way of habit and conscious training. And finally, I want to do some meditative exercises in order to be able to demonstrate that we have the capacity to retrain the mind's consciousness flow. Now, all this in the space of a little over half an hour is a tall order, but I know I'm speaking to a very refined, developed audience, and I'm sure that we'll be able to achieve our goals within the time frame we have. We've been confined to a much more limited space in the last several weeks. You've been practicing social containment, social isolation, as we have here. And therefore, the opportunity for introspection and observation has probably taken place with all of us, whether deliberately or not so. And in so doing, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that determines the true persona that I am, that you are? We are many faces, and we present many faces under different circumstances and different influences. But what is the real I? So in order to understand my inner self, the topography and geology of my consciousness, and I have to define this word consciousness as we go along because it's a big word. I'd like to propose the following model for you to consider. That you and I, individually, are spiritual umbilical cords. One end is connected in the very center of creation, in the Creator itself. And the other end of that spiritual umbilical cord that feeds off it is you and I and each one of us individually. And the energy of life flows through that spiritual umbilical cord. And you and I use that energy, but God has a sense of humor. And he provided us with another little asset called free choice, Bechira Chafshis. And therefore we can take that flow of energy and we can utilize it in one of two ways. Because once that spiritual cord enters into our being, it divides into two. One is an illusionary aspect of self. We call it the nefesh bahamis, our animalistic self, not putting down animals at all, but referring to our more instinctive nature. In other words, self-preservation. What Maslow called in his hierarchical model, the quest for food, clothing, shelter, and then self-actualization. Now, these are all laudable acts. We have to survive, and all these are necessary, but they are all me-oriented. They're self-centered by necessity. But the nature of the nefesh bahamis is it knows no bounds. It has no boundaries. How much food should I eat? Well, my taste buds are right now telling me I want more and more of that ice cream or that 7-layer chocolate cake. Clothing. Well, how much clothing can my cupboard wardrobe hold? Well, I need more. The media is projecting all its wonderful images of how I should look. Shelter. Well, my house is too small. I need to have a bigger home and I need to have more fancy elements of the house. I have to have chandeliers everywhere, even chandeliers in the toilet. In other words, the nefesh bahamis knows no bounds. And even when we come to self-actualization, things like, I want to grow, I want to evolve, I want to develop. And you would say to me, these are very proper positions to take, are they not? And I'll say, no, they're highly selfish. What do you mean? I want to grow. What's selfish about that? Because it's all about you. I want to grow. So what would be the better placed question? The question is, how can I become a better facilitator, a better spouse, a better parent, a better citizen? What's the difference between I want to grow and I want to become a better citizen? Difference is the second is in context of another. It's not just about you. It's about the relationship. If it's all about you, I want to increase my muscle density, then it's about you going to the gym and being able to do that. If it's all about me wanting to adopt another spiritual pathway to my various repertoires of spirituality, it's still all about you. But if you want to use that spirituality for something greater and bigger, then it's the other. And therefore we have another side to self, not just the self-centered, ego-centered I, nefesh bahamis. We have the nefesh elokis. The nefesh elokis is the truer self, the altruistic self, the self that is other-centered. It's my life is there to serve you, to assist you, to help you. Think back of moments when you felt truly happy, fulfilled, feeling high. If you look back in your memory banks and try to locate those moments, I'm sure you will find they are always in context of another, usually another loved one. In other words, true happiness, the true I, unleashing the true I, is always in the context of relationship. Now, this nefesh elokis, the godly self, is the truer self. Whereas the nefesh bahamis is more an illusion that Hashem presented to us in order to test us, in order to overcome and grow and evolve in an altruistic manner. So, in answer to the first question, who is the true I? The true I is the I who lives for the other, who serves the other. When I was completing my doctorate studies, I had to complete some studies in leadership theory. And I came across an approach in leadership theory that was called servant leadership. Some of you might be familiar with it. I read a book, one book amongst others, that left an impression to the present day. It's called Synchronicity. It's written by Joseph Jaworski. Some of you might remember the name Jaworski as the Watergate prosecutor, Leon Jaworski. Well, this is his son. And servant leadership means that leadership isn't about positional power. It isn't about me exercising control and power over you because I know best and I'm the leader. Servant leadership means that I facilitate your growth. I facilitate your development. A true leader is a true facilitator. And that relates to Nefesh Elokis in context of the other. And that's the true you. So think well about yourself. Allow yourself to recognize self-esteem, self-worth. You are worthy. And if at times we seem to fail because the Nefesh Bahamis, our ego self, gets in the way, well, we overcome that. We fight that. But the first awareness, consciousness, what in the contemporary language is called mindfulness, to be mindful and aware of who you are. So what is consciousness? Well, we're made up of two other component parts: the spiritual flow, the energy, and a piece of machinery. That piece of machinery is biological machinery. It's the body. It's our physiology. And it's the interface between the energy of life that courses through us and the way we allow that life to flow through us, through our body, that creates consciousness. So if I allow the energy flow of life to flow through the machinery called brain, brain is a piece of machinery. There's nothing mystical about brain. There's nothing spiritual about brain. Brain is physical, but I have the capacity to direct the spiritual flow through the brain in such a way I can use my physiology in such a way by exercise of choice that the result is mindfulness, consciousness, awareness. So there are these two elements. And by the way, if I can segue and indicate why it's such a major mitzvah to be healthy, why it's so terribly important to practice maintenance of body, is because that is the determinant of how your individual spiritual umbilical cord can express in the world through the body. If the body in some shape or form has an impediment, then that limits that flow. You can't unleash the full you. And that's why health and wellness is an absolute mitzvah in Judaism. No less a mitzvah than Shabbos, Kashrus, Tefillin, Shabbos, candle lighting, etc. So, in answer to the question of who is the true you, you have a choice. You have a choice of controlling the lower order self, the ego self, which now, I'm going to segue to the next section, produces fear, insecurity, stress. What are fear and insecurity and stress? The kind of things that we tend to, that occupies our mind in these current circumstances. So I want to be very, very straightforward with you. Fear, insecurity, anxiety, anxiousness, all these are the product of you and I playing the role of a prophet, not P-R-O-F-I-T, but P-R-O-P-H-E-T. In other words, you and I projecting what tomorrow is all about. And if that is a negative projection, the result is worry, insecurity, stress. So I want to ask you, are you a prophet? I'm not. Well, I shouldn't talk about you because there may well be a prophet in our audience here. But I'll speak about myself. I'm not a prophet. And therefore, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Therefore, why do I arbitrarily almost jump to the conclusion that tomorrow is going to be harder, more difficult, more challenging, and might even overcome me, resulting in worry? Because I'm playing the wrong role. I'm not a prophet. All worry, all anxiety is the result of me jumping to conclusions. Now, some of you will say, but some of those are reasonable conclusions. But the answer is, it's still a probability. Ultimately, there's a 50-50 statistical probability that tomorrow will be worse than today or better than today. You don't know. Admit it. You don't know. So why do you jump to the conclusion that the cup is half empty? Maybe it's half full. And to do that, I'm going to introduce two words into our lexicon, into our vocabulary. The two words are emunah and bitachon. The translation of those words is commonly emunah being faith and bitachon being trust or security. Now, they're big words. I don't know what the English word faith and the English word trust really means. So I'm going to break it down. The way the Laibl Rebbe broke these words down into a way that you and I can understand them pragmatically. So listen carefully. Emunah is the belief that everything that has ever happened to you is for your current good. Again, emunah is your belief that everything that's ever happened in the past is for your current good. Bitachon or bitachon is the belief that the challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. The challenge you face now will have a positive outcome. What's the difference between these two? Emunah deals from the past to the present. Whatever's ever happened to you, even if it's been painful, God forbid, even if it seems to you to have been negative, is somehow for your current good in ways that you will never know. Past to present. Bitachon is the belief that the challenge you face now will have a positive outcome, present to future. These two are axiomatic propositions, which is another way of saying they're unprovable. So why should you adopt a belief that's unprovable? Because that's what the word belief means. Belief starts where rationality stops. If you could rationally prove something, you wouldn't need belief. And since you don't know anything about tomorrow, it must be an aspect of belief. Now I want to tell you why you should adopt these two propositions. Axiomatically, non-rationally, not irrationally, non-rationally. And I'll tell you why. Because if you are positively disposed, number one, you'll be healthier. There's clear medical statistical evidence that people have positive dispositions are healthier, suffer less ailments. So that's one very good rationale. Now I'll give you a second one. Relationships improve. People like to be around positive people. They don't like to be around pessimists. And therefore, as a consequence of being positively oriented, you'll deepen your relationships and you'll increase your relationships. And since, as we know from a recent Harvard University study, relationships are the major source, the primary source of our happiness quotient, that's a big one. So if you say tomorrow is going to be better than today, you're practicing emunah and bitachon and helping your immune system to fight the coronavirus, to fight the COVID-19, because immunity plays such a huge role. And it allows you to be a happier person through your relationships. So I want you to choose to adopt these two axiomatic propositions, emunah and bitachon. I can't make you do that, but you can choose to do that. So that's the second aspect I wanted to suggest to you. And now the third aspect. How do you train yourself in these things? How do you train mental dispositions? How do you train yourself to be a positive individual? Can I alter my genetic makeup? Well, genes are physical aspects of the body. Genes are not spiritual. And genes provide us with personality traits. That's true, meaning that the way that our neshama, soul, flows through the genetic code of the body produces personality attributes, but doesn't define our personality, meaning as follows. We know that the 4 primary ways that we express ourselves is summarized in the elements of fire, air, earth, and water. In different spiritual systems, they've adopted this kind of calibration. In the Chinese system, they adopted 2 more, wood and metal, but we stick with the original 4. Now, when we say fire, air, earth, and water, I'm not being antiquated. I'm not referring to some ancient system. It's very sophisticated. Some of you who I am watching now are fire-oriented individuals with the fire aspect of yourself dominant. You can almost intuitively know who that is, recognize yourself. A fire person is emotionally charged. They give of their emotions freely, but you have a choice. Am I going to direct my emotions this way or that way? Am I going to direct the emotions through my lower order self, nefesh bahamis, resulting in anger, resulting in rage, resulting in negative expressions of fire? Or will I choose to take my fire-dominated self and express it positively in strong expressions of compassion, empathy? That we have a choice. That's not genetically programmed. The genetics will give you a sense that you may be a fire person, but it doesn't tell you how to express it. You have a choice about how you express it. Or say you're an earth person. What's an earth person? You can almost intuitively guess. An earth person expresses negatively by being lazy, by being low, in other words, despondent, by moving into depressive states. Or an earth person can be steady, reliable, solid. You have a choice on how you take your earth personality and express it. Likewise with the other 2, which I won't go through right now. Excuse me, I just have to decline that. And to express it, you have a choice. So what I'm saying to you is, your life has taken a certain toll and habituated you in certain ways to continuously express the easiest way of fire, air, earth, and water. And you may not like that. And therefore you want to change that. You want to adopt a higher order self. Can you do that? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because ultimately, consciousness flows from the way that the neshama flows through the brain. So we need to change our brain. Can you change your brain? Can you trade it in? Of course not. But we now know, again through recent research, how we have the capacity to choose the way that we direct the flow of consciousness. In other words, what's a thought? A thought is 2 nerve end fibers in the brain being connected via a neurotransmitting flow. Neurotransmitters flowing from this point to this point. That's what a thought is. Of course, I'm putting it awfully simplistically. But if you continue to allow that flow to continue on and on, if you always take umbrage when someone is saying that nasty thing about you, then you're training that flow to get deeper and deeper into a groove. So it's much more likely that you'll get upset and angry when that person says it again. And that becomes a habit. A habit means an ongoing training of that neurotransmittic flow. How can I change that? By laying down a new pathway, new nerve end fibers, new transmitting pathway. And if I can train myself, and this is where meditation comes into the picture, and I'm moving into a discussion of that, then I am able to allow the old pathway to become disused, and my actuated one is the new pathway, consciously, deliberately. In other words, you are the artist of your brain. You are the creator of the dominant pathways in your brain. And you have the capacity to train that. So isn't that wonderful to know that you are actually the artist who can sculpt a new brain for yourself, new consciousness, new ways of responding to the exigencies of every day as such. So that's the amount of theory that I'd like to propose before I move into a number of meditative exercises to demonstrate how you can actually achieve these goals. So just in quick summary, firstly, I want to give you the broad overview. I've taken some basic and deep Jewish spiritual teachings drawn from many sources, but primarily a work known as Sefer Tanya, the book of Tanya, which I'm sure you're familiar with, having been in touch with Rabbi Bentelow. And what I'm showing to you is that there is an connection between the spiritual self and the physical self, and that you and I have the capacity to choose that interposition and to be able to express it. And I've now shown you that you have a choice on how to do so. And you can therefore choose emunah and bitochen and be a positively disposed individual rather than a negative disposed individual. So now let me take you into the aspect of exercises. Meditation. What is meditation? Well, if you consult Professor Google, you'll find that there are hundreds of different vantage points as to what meditation is. And if you ever come across a site that says, we have the right way to meditate, follow us, steer clear. There's no such thing as right and wrong meditation. Meditate is a verb. The common denominator behind all meditations is focusing. But what you focus on, why you focus, with what goal you focus, that depends on the particular spiritual pathway or psychological teaching or medicinal practice, whatever might be the case. It's just a tool. Meditation is a tool, and you have to be able to utilize that tool wisely, or God forbid, unwisely. We generally associate the word meditation with Eastern meditation because in the 60s and 70s, when some enterprising Eastern gurus made their way across from India to the West and reintroduced the word meditation as a process, we adopted the word meditation to mean that. That's the way we perceive it as. But really, meditation is much more ancient than that. In fact, in the Jewish spiritual tradition, we've been practicing meditation for a long, long time. Why and how? So, for example, when I introduce a morning to the process of tefillah and prayer, I will begin by studying a wisdom teaching, and I will then move away from the wisdom teaching, choosing one point, and I will try to allow that point to enter into my being so that the wisdom flows through me so I can actually express it throughout the day. That meditation process is called hisboinenus in our Chabad Hasidic tradition. And there are other methodologies to be adopted as such. The meditations that I'm going to share with you deal more with the contemporary setting of how do I move away from a moment of stress and move away from the stressor, creating a vacuum? And then how do I move into a positive, and I'm going to use today creative imagery, in order to be able to move out of that process of meditation and become a positive individual? So there'll be two stages in my meditation: first creating a vacuum, and then moving into positivity. I'm going to use breath as the focus for the first part of the meditation. And that's used quite extensively in many systems. And in our Jewish spiritual teachings, there's a very good reason why we choose breath. The Hebrew word for breath is neshima. As you know, the Hebrew word for soul is neshama. They're etymologically connected in a very profound way. In other words, breath reveals my state of soul. The way I breathe reveals what's happening deep within. In fact, there's an interesting chumash in Shemos when Moses comes to Eretz Mitzrayim, and he comes to Egypt, and he says to the Jewish people, "You're going to leave soon." Well, they practically ignore him. And Rashi comments there and says that they are suffering mikotzer ruach, shortness of breath. What does it mean, shortness of breath? When you are stressed, when you're anxious, you breathe with quick, shallow breaths to oxygenate the body. Like when you run the 100-yard dash, you're also heaving with your chest to oxygenate the body to make up for the depletion. But it also means stress. The Jewish people in Egypt were stressed to the point that they didn't allow their minds to absorb what Moses was saying. So I'm going to use breath as a way of creating the space needed. Move away from shallow breathing to deep breathing. And then I'm going to take you on a little creative imagery exercise to tell you how secure you are and not to worry. So, posture. Adopt just a posture in your chair of symmetry. Feet situated on the ground next to each other, hands resting on knees and thighs, back fairly straight without being too rigid, head well balanced on your shoulders, and gently close your eyes. And just focus on your breath, gently breathing in and out quite normally. But I would ask you now to breathe in and out through your nose, if you can. And slow down your breathing and deepen it through your nose. And become aware of the difference in temperature of the air entering your nostrils compared to the temperature of the air exiting from your nose. Cooler air entering and slightly warmer air exiting. And just stay focused on that temperature difference. Slow, deep breaths in and out. Cool air, warm air. Allow your shoulders to slump a little. And with your next deep breaths, direct the breath down to your abdomen. And the way to do that is as you breathe in, expand your abdomen to collect the air, and then pull the abdomen in to expel the air. So take a slow, deep breath, expand the abdomen, collecting the air, and contract the abdomen to expel the air. This is a little counterintuitive, so practice it for a few breaths. The slower and deeper the breathing, the easier it is. As you breathe in, expand your abdomen, then contract it, and the chest remains relatively still. It's your abdomen that's acting like a pump. So practice it for 2 or 3 breaths, expanding the abdomen as you breathe in. And now let's lend some rhythm to the breathing. We'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and breathe out for a count of 4. So take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. Through the abdomen, in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And just continue breathing abdominally, rhythmically, gracefully, smoothly, a perfectly round circle through the nose, down to the abdomen, and out. Feeling that relaxation response and noting how you've created inner peace in the space of a few short minutes, something you can do anytime you choose. And now moving into the second phase of our exercises, I want you to become aware of a glow of light in your brain. Just picture, feel that glow in the center of your head. It's pleasant, it's warming, it's comfortable. Increase that glow so that it fills your total headspace. Feeling the glow and the warmth. Increase the intensity so that it begins to flow down your neck into your torso, chest and back. Feel the light glowing now inside your body. Feeling its warmth and light. Increase the intensity even a little more so that it flows down to your limbs, your thighs, legs, feet, arms, wrists, hands, fingers. And feel that glow throughout your body, the energy of life, and now extending to the surface of your skin all over. Your skin aglow, extending from your body, and now beyond your skin, a glow around you, an aura that you create, an aura that protects you. We call this Magen Avraham, Abraham's shield of protection all around you, that aura, that glow, an aura of protection that extends beyond you. And now allow that glow to envelop your room so you feel completely secure in the cocoon of that glow. And beyond, surrounding your home, and extending beyond into the world, so that you are contributing to the security and welfare, warmth and comfort of all peoples. This Magen Avram, everyone possesses it, but you have to activate it consciously from the center of your head, where the Nefesh Elokis begins its journey throughout your body. Spend a few moments basking in the security of your aura, protecting you against all elements of hurt, pain, or danger. Focus again on your nose and the air entering the nose and exiting. Become aware again of the temperature difference, cooler air entering, warmer air exiting. Begin moving your fingers and your toes in the room where you are. Move your fingers now, move your toes. And when you feel ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back into the here and now, back into the world that Hashem has chosen us to be in. I hope we haven't lost anyone there. Now, doing something like that may be a pleasant experience, but I'm talking about it being part of a training program. I'm talking about playing the piano. Now, I'm sure that some of you might play the piano, but some of you might not. And if you wanted to play the piano today, I'm sure you wouldn't go the old-fashioned route of trying to being told, play the scales over and over again. You are a modern individual. You will take the route of, I'm going to study music. I'm going to study the theory of music. I'm going to study the tonal qualities of all the instruments. I'm going to study the biography of all the great composers, the Schuberts, the Beethovens, the Mozarts, Haydns, etc. And then at the end of the year, when I really understand music, that's when I'm going to sit behind the keyboard and I'm going to say, fingers, do your stuff. And guess what? At the end of that year of intense study of music, the fingers will not do their stuff. And you wonder why. My head knows music. Why doesn't my finger know the music? The finger's connected to me. And of course, you would say, but that's obvious. But it's not so obvious. The reason is because you haven't yet made that neurotransmitter connection in the brain of the knowledge to flow into the finger. So you go back and decide that the old-fashioned way of playing the scales over and over again works. Same in meditation. Doing something nicely, having had it explained by Laibl Wolf or anyone else, that's okay. But it's practice the scales, doing this over and over again. I suggest 3 times a day, that we start to get an effect of change of attitudinal response to life's exigencies. You won't create the change without playing the scales, without doing the hard work. Sure, initially the time taken will be longer, but I'm telling you now that after a month, you will have reduced and been able to reduce that first exercise of breath down to 60 seconds, and the second exercise of any creative imagery to another 60 seconds. And if you practice it 3 times a day from then on, for the rest of your life, bis 120, you'll be a different person. There's methodology to change the way that we direct the flow of spiritual consciousness through our higher order self, Nefesh Elokis, as opposed to lower order self, Nefesh Bahamis. So what I've done this morning, well, my morning, your evening, is showing you that there's an interface between Jewish spiritual teachings and our contemporary setting, even utilizing the understanding of discovery of the nature of the world in a scientific manner. And that's always the case. Behind all science must lie wisdom. The wisdom lies with you. It's your choice. I'm going to pause now, just in case there are any questions that you may want to ask of me, anything that needs clarification, and I'm more than happy to do so. Thank you. Up to you, Rabbi and audience. Unmute.
Okay, thank you, Reb Laibl. That was unbelievable. Though if there is a way to raise your hand on the thing, and there's also a chat, if anybody would like to ask questions, you can type it in over there. Typing it is always the best, but if anybody here would like to ask questions, I see Victor has raised his hand. I'm going to unmute you, Victor, and we're going to let you, and I see David has a hand up. We'll go to you next.
First of all, thank you very much. That was enlightening and spiritually enlightening. So I really appreciate that. But isn't meditation also very similar to self-hypnosis? Because that's what I felt as I was going through the 2 exercises. The whole idea of my legs and my hands and everything feeling frozen to my body and seeing the light, etc., etc. At one point in my life, I experienced a lot of hypnosis, and it brought me back to that aura.
Sure. Yes, it's on the spectrum. Auto-hypnosis is on the same spectrum. Like you have along that spectrum, you have at the far right end, if I might say, activity, constant influences. Your mind is wide awake and your body is moving, your mind is moving. Move across and you have a relaxed state. Less movement of the body, less movement of the mind. Move further across and you have meditation, where you create relative stillness of body and very limited use of mind on a deeper focus. Move across and you have sleep. Sleep, your body tends to move even less and your mind is also operating at a lower level. Then you have unconsciousness and then you have death. So it's all along a spectrum. And yes, what you're experiencing is somewhere along that spectrum, but that's quite okay and quite normal. You can use it specifically for therapy, as might be used in hypnosis, although I personally don't advocate it. But because I think there are better approaches, but nevertheless, it's all on a spectrum. And yes, your observation of yourself in that context is probably quite correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Victor. Any other questions over here? Rona, I see your hand is raised.
Hi, and thank you so much. That was very warming and quite beautiful. You talked about different types of meditations and medical meditations, neurotransmitters, engage, being rebuilt. And I'm wondering, and this is sort of a selfish question, if you know where I can go look for people who do this type of thing to help heal the body.
There are practitioners, medical practitioners. I know that in Australia, the medical profession is adopting also a very good part of its practice utilizing alternative therapies. And there are a number of doctors who practice the use of meditation, certainly a good number of psychologists also. Not being familiar with the your immediate scene and who those people might are, I can't give you any definitive answer, but I would dare say that if you read the books and listen to the audios of a person who I have a lot of confidence in, and he's online, you can find him, Ian Gawler, Gawler, Dr. Ian Gawler. He happens to be an Australian, but he's a worldwide authority, and he does some very, very good exercises in this regard, and I would recommend him.
Unmute. Thank you, Laibl. One of the questions that was asked on the chat, I think you might have spoken about this earlier, but I'm going to mention again, is how often should one do the breathing technique we learned today?
I strongly advise you to do it 3 times a day. When you wake up in the morning, after the morning affirmation of gratitude called Mudde Ani, I would spend a bit of time doing the breathing exercise so that you move into the day in a positive disposition, because the posture you adopt at the beginning of the day leaves a residue for the rest of the day. Then as the day begins to advance and many different factors start to take their toll on you, around lunchtime is a good time to break the stress cycle, because the problem with stress is cumulative stress. Stress building upon stress, building upon stress. If you can break the cycle and stress has to start again, then there's much less toll on your body. So middle of the day is a good time. And then in the evening, before you go to sleep, because quality sleep is one of the most important features of maintaining the integrity of the body and health and wellness. It's not just the length of sleep, but the quality of sleep. And therefore, if you can go to sleep in a nice, serene setting of your inner climate and environment, that will assist greatly in your sleep mode. So yeah, I advise 3 times a day. And as I said, it eventually gets down to just a small investment of time for long and large returns.
Thank you.
By the way, I did put up my email address there in the chat, and I'm more than happy to put you on my meditation list. I send out daily 60-second WhatsApp meditations. So if you were to email me with your number, I'd gladly put you on a WhatsApp list of meditations or put you on my list for anything else. Feel free to be in touch.
Thank you very, very much. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Or questions specifically?
I noticed that there's a chat question of whether this is the same as neuroplasticity. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Neuroplasticity is just an evolving new word for the idea that we can retrain the pathways of our mind, that the brain is plastic, so to speak, metaphorically, and you can reshape it. So yes, that's a very good way to describe some of the things that I was speaking about.
Any other questions over here? You could raise your hand physically if you prefer to do it that way, if you're not quite sure how to use the controls. I see Elaine has a question.
Am I unmuted? Oh, okay. Well, I don't have a question. I just want to say when I started tonight, I had a splitting headache. And after the meditation, I don't have it anymore.
Isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful. I've had it for days. So thank you.
Yeah, it means, if I could put it quaintly like this, it's not that the headaches plague us, it's that we create the plague of the headaches. In other words, by our dispositions, the way we create our moods, the kind of stresses we put in our body, and it's possible to control and prevent a lot of headaches in this way. Not all, because some are chemically based rather than environmentally based, but nevertheless, it will cure a lot of things, not just headaches.
Thank you. Victor, I see your hand is raised. You've got another question or comment?
Yes, I read a little bit, Rabbi Wolf, in your biography that at a time in your life you wanted to go to Kollel, and the Rebbe said that wasn't your what you were to do, and you wound up working in, I think, the University of Wisconsin, was it, in the States, and spent a lot of time there. And I know that you communicated a lot with the Rebbe based on your biography. Could you share with us some of the greater experiences that you personally had with the Rebbe?
Yes, if we have another hour of time, I could probably do that. Perhaps, but not to deprive you, let me just share perhaps one particular wisdom teaching that the Rebbe shared with me. You're quite correct. There was a time early in my career when I had completed my rabbinical and my academic studies, and I was already working in a position not unlike Rabbi Mendelau's, and I thought I still needed a little more knowledge base to do justice to people, and I asked the Rebbe if I could take a year off for further studies, and the Rebbe answered me very, very plainly and curtly. Sometimes a Rebbe will to a chassid. To non-Hasidim, the Rebbe tends to be a little kinder and nicer and more circumspect. But he said to me, if I translate the words, this is a time of war, and at a time of war, a good soldier is not allowed to leave the front line. And that was the end of my further academic studies in Judaism or otherwise. There was an occasion when I had yechidus with the Rebbe. I had the good fortune of having 9 personal audiences with the Rebbe, and on one particular occasion, and that, you triggered it in my mind, my memory. I was working at the University of Wisconsin, and my role was to try to counsel, assist, and bring closer to Yiddishkeit 7,000 Jewish students, which was the Jewish population at that time of a campus that had 49,000 students. And I was the only Jewish trigger that the students might have had there at that time. And I asked the Rebbe, how's it possible for one individual to try to work with 7,000 Jewish students? Students. And the Rebbe, I'm getting a bit of an echo. And the Rebbe responded to me and said, your job is not to work with 7,000. Your job is to encounter 7. If you are successful qualitatively in encountering those 7 will find their 7, and their 7 will find their 7. And I learned from that the importance of working with people individually and qualitatively. And that's what I want to leave the message with you as well. And the message is, every one of us is a leader. Every one of us leaves an influence in our immediate environment. You have to be able to walk away from this session and say, I will be a servant leader. I'll facilitate the growth of those around me. How will I do that? By exuding confidence, by demonstrating that I'm taking a positive disposition, a positive attitude, and in so doing, allow that to be a multiplier effect that'll affect people around me, and they will affect people around them. So I want to leave you with that thought that each one of us has a responsibility and a duty to be a positive individual. And the way that the Friedeker Rebbe often noted the phrase, "Tracht gut und wird sein gut," think positive and the outcomes will be positive. That's exactly what we have to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Reb Laibl, Rabbi Wolf. He did post his email address, as I said, in the chat, and Michal reposted it there. Somebody emailed us, a few people emailed us asking for that. Thank you. This was tremendous. It was just an unbelievable way of thinking about this, and very heartwarming, and also very powerful experience for me. And I know personally, my resolution from tonight is to do some serious deep breathing before doing my daily prayers 3 times a day. I think it's a very powerful way of focusing in on that experience and slowing everything down and getting focused in a powerful way. So thank you personally. I think that's very powerful, and I appreciate it. We will have another one of these speaker events next Thursday. I'll be sending out an email about that, and I hope you'll join us for that. I'll also be sending out a video recording of tonight's program to you all by email so that you can watch it again and get more from there. I think we've all been unmuted. Okay, but
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Very much, everybody.
Thank you. Both rabbis. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi,
Excellent.
for taking the time to do this with us, and have a good Shabbos.
Have a good
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Shabbos, everyone.
I heard Rabbi speak in Stanford years ago. It was excellent. This was a reminder of that.
It was great.
Thank you so much.
Greetings from Chicago.
Thanks, Sally. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's great.
Thanks for doing all this. Thanks, Victor. Thanks,
you.
Rabbi.
Thank you all.
See everybody tomorrow morning.
Yes.
That was beautiful.
Night, Jerry.
Thanks.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night.
That's what I thought.